When the Canucks miss the playoffs again.
When Jim Benning trades away all our picks.
When Goldalden is scratched for the third game in a row. C4 is there. With Sedin-like vision, Horvat's work ethic, and Petey's electric personality. Here comes the C4 Canucks Hockey Podcast with Chris, Matt, Anna, and Adam.
Powered by Overtime Media.
Welcome to another episode of the C4 Canucks Hockey Podcast. In fact, this is the first episode of the year 2020. I am Chris at Lightforce, joined in a smaller hot box by Matt Lee at @MattLee_61 and Anna Forsyth at AForsyth03. Continuing to be missing in action, Adam Ovenell Carter at AdamFOC. I was wondering if we would start off 2020 with or without Adam. And it's quite clear we are starting off the year without Adam.
Did you see the screen cap of our conversation, though?
He does.
How do we know that's real, though?
Yeah, that's true.
We don't.
But the long and short of it is he believes this team is making the playoffs now.
See, that's a big thing for Adam. And when he shared that, I was actually thinking, like, Adam and I were probably the two pessimists, him probably being more so than me. I'd somewhat accepted that it was a possibility, and I was worried that the possibility would give false hope that this was a Stanley Cup contender. But I will admit, there's some good things going. It's hard not to after a...
7-game win
Yeah,
streak.
exactly. Like, there are so many people jumping on the bandwagon, myself included, apparently.
Yeah, I actually thought the key to Canucks' success was me being out of the country, but I'm glad to see that that's not the case.
It is carried over,
yeah.
if you will. We'll get into it, but quick question for the room. Is the Vancouver Canucks fan bandwagon the fullest it has been since they last made the playoffs? Yes or no?
Since they last made the playoffs?
I don't think so. I don't think we're there yet.
Well, no, like, the fullest it's been, it's not like...
Is fan belief in the team at the highest point it's been since when they made the playoffs in 2015-14?
I would say it's probably to the point of
15.
Fullness comparative to the last time they made the playoffs. The only debate I'd wonder is back when we were talking about this team potentially being a Stanley Cup contender based on the percentages of 15 games in, and the Canucks were like top of the league. Maybe
but we're here at the halfway, like the official halfway mark, and they're now still officially in the hunt.
Correct.
In fact, even more in the hunt than they've ever been.
Fair enough. And it's hard. It's a fair point, salient point you raised.
It's a fair point. Anyway, how was your guys' holiday?
Good.
You came back from the motherland.
Yeah, I did come back. Yeah, I had a good time. Saw all the Forsyths.
I saw the this tweet that you sent out of some kid being dragged by a luggage
yeah.
at the airport.
That was at Heathrow.
So
well, it wasn't a kid.
Paint the picture.
Dragged.
He's not being dragged, but he's on the luggage.
He is being dragged, but it's by his consent. His dad is literally pulling.
It's him on top of one of those wheelie suitcase luggagey thingies.
And his dad is just pulling the suitcase.
Because the kid is clearly too lazy to walk in the airport.
Oh, and this went on all the way from the main terminal all the way to the furthest gates.
Was the kid like sitting on the suitcase?
Yes, he was sitting on the suitcase.
It was more just like holding on.
Yeah, but not like feet dragging behind, no?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Man, that's...
I was just
kids these days, am I right?
If Baby Force tries to do that, she's going to be left behind in Heathrow.
Yeah, this kid was quite old, like 5 or 6.
Yeah,
for sure.
I mean, I'm saying this about a 2.5-year-old. She won't. I'd pick her up. I'd carry her. She wouldn't have any say in the matter, but...
Yeah, I just thought, oh my God, I'm so glad I don't have kids.
You say that all the time, by the way.
I do. Sorry.
She hates babies unless they're at least her own anyway.
Yeah, I just don't want them.
It's fair enough.
Yeah.
I've got one.
If you need a babysitter, though, she's there for you.
Oh, yeah.
Well, as long as I get to give her back. That's the main part.
She wants it on loan, not for the real.
Exactly.
There's no transference of ownership when it comes to Baby Force. That's not going to happen. As for holidays with me, I spent time with the fam. In-laws were down from the Sunshine Coast. They hung out with us. Went out to my parents for sort of a larger Christmas dinner. This is the first year where I was awake for New Year's, midnight, with Baby Force and my wife completely dead to the world on the couch. That's it's usually the reverse. I'm in bed by 10.
What a crazy New Year's.
Well, it is.
Calm down there.
That is in my world. The fact that I was on Twitter at the time, that just, normally which wouldn't happen. Wild and crazy when you get my age.
I made it to midnight even though I flew in at 4 p.m. So
Not only did I make it to midnight, I made it till 2 a.m., but I was like grouchy as hell by the time 2 a.m. rolled around. I was cranky and I wanted to go to bed.
So that's like normal Matt.
I'm the most positive person
yeah,
here.
positive and sunny.
It's always sunny in
Not in Matt's world.
Matt's
Matadelphia?
world.
Matadelphia.
Yeah. I was trying to come up with a funny thing.
So something that actually happened over the New Year's for the podcast is we got a review. And normally I would save these things to the end of a podcast. But I wanted to actually talk about this one at the start because, one, I don't want to forget the whole rule of we will read your review verbatim.
Good, bad, or ugly.
Right, good, bad, or ugly. So I wanted to address it right at the stop. So we got a 3 out of 5 star review from Dak Attack 92 titled Do Your Research. This podcast is all right. Does its job of keeping me entertained, but for the longest running Canucks podcast, that being in quotes, almost every host lacks knowledge about the team, the league, and how things are run. I understand that it's an amateur podcast, but when you can't even look up expansion draft rules, let alone actually know when it is, and have basic knowledge of the CBA, it's very frustrating.
I would agree that was not our finest moment as Matt and I tried to
Yep,
remember
I'll own it.
the expansion draft rules.
So I'm not going to defend, obviously, ourselves because, there are a lot of Canuck podcasts out there these days. And we have fans and listeners that choose to listen to our podcast, and we appreciate every single one of them. But at the same time, we all have full-time jobs here. It is very difficult sometimes to put in what is effectively a full-time job, is keeping up with the Canucks sometimes. And that's something that fans do all the time as well, but we're fans too. And not every single fan knows about the ins and outs of the CBA. Not every fan knows the ins and outs of how expansion works. We are always looking for ways to improve, and we will continue to do better. But at the same time, we are, we're still fans, and we don't know the answers to everything. And I think every one of us fully cops to that.
Yeah, and Chris wasn't there, and he's our CBA guy.
Chris is definitely trying to let himself off the hook on the grounds that he was not there for the last podcast.
No, but I so the only point I was going to raise, first and foremost, thank you for the review, and in fact, it's 3 out of 5 stars.
I was going to say,
that's pretty good.
I see this as an absolute win.
So I got into a conversation with someone on, I want to say it was Canucks Reddit. And this goes back to the days where someone was ragging on C4, and I replied, I'm like, well, thank you for the feedback. Apologies for the waste of your time. We'll aim to do better. But I was saying it because, quite frankly, if I go back to episode 1, when Clay and I are sitting around my ottoman, we described this as just 2 guys who happen to be fans of hockey who wanted to have a conversation about it and then start to involve other people. And I'd like to think that, yes, we are the longest running Canucks podcast for a reason. We're fans first who like talking about the team and simply have conversation. And I would almost position us to be more representative of what's often referred to as, Canucks Twitter, or this giant group of people. I think Brian Burke was talking about us this weekend on Hockey Night in Canada. We're the very small yet vocal group. I think we're a really good representation of that.
Yeah, I felt oddly proud when he referred to Canucks Twitter like that.
Well, so, okay, and on off the rails bit, how is it that these people not only can send an email to Brian Burke, but get on the phone and reach out to him? I don't have Brian's email, nor do I have his phone number.
I don't want to brag, but I have interviewed Brian Burke before.
Why is he not on C4?
Yeah,
we can get him here. He could
I don't have the number still.
He can rock the dress shirt without the tie and maybe the scarf.
Yeah, we don't have a dress code.
No, neither does Brian.
I don't
Burke.
think he would want to bring in a tie in this hot box. Let's put it that way.
But back to the review again. I'm not trying to thank you for sharing it. It's just I want to set those expectations. We're not going to be, the same level as a. I'll use the Athletics podcast. They make money based on people supporting them, and that's where they drive it. Whereas for us, we make money because our patrons are kind enough to help me pay our bills, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. We got a lot to talk to about today, guys. So we will skip past that. But thank you once again, Dak, for the review. We'll talk about the World Juniors. We'll talk about the Vancouver Canucks to this point at the halfway mark, giving out some mid-season grades, if you will. We'll talk about that push once again for the playoffs. It has been a continuous storyline throughout the year, and it will continue to be so in this podcast. So that's all coming up next on the C4 podcast, CanucksHockeyBlog.com.
So the Vancouver Canucks 7-game winning streak. This is like the... And, you think back of like some of the past winning streaks where the Canucks were just on a tear where you're like, oh, man, no team can stop them. This one seems to be a winning streak despite itself. Like the Vancouver Canucks have seemed quite fallible throughout, yet are finding ways to either, one, Markstrom themselves out of a tight game.
Like, with the exception of that Chicago game where it was the back-and-forth affair and a 7-5 win, like, Jacob Markstrom has put his stamp on this win streak, has he not?
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Oh, big time.
But that, like, you don't look at this as being sustainable in any way, shape, or form. Like, I was going to say something on Twitter about it. I'm like, no, because then people would think I'm cursing it. But it's true. Like, at one point in time, the Vancouver Canucks bubble is going to burst. And if it may burst, it may be on the road. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But let's say you take Jacob Markstrom out of the picture here. How is this Vancouver Canucks team right now? Like, I quite frankly see him as being the differentiator. And I'll be eating a lot of crow here. I was the guy who, at the start of the season, like, trade Markstrom, get value for him now. I still think he's actually more valuable today, but I would not trade him because I don't see how the Vancouver Canucks continue to perform without him in the net.
I think it's a very different team.
From today as opposed to at the start of the season?
Well, no, just if you take Markstrom out of it, I think it suddenly looks, much bleaker for the Canucks. I think they're outperforming themselves because of him.
Well, he's single-handedly stopping, was it 9-ish pucks out of 10 right now? He's like 905, 907, I think, without looking it up. But he should be in the conversation for Vezina vote.
I was just going to ask.
The Vezina itself. But yet, I was listening to, I think it's 1040 this morning. Halford and Bruff were going over the NHL.com vote where Markstrom didn't even get a vote.
Jacob Markstrom is the Vancouver Canucks MVP at this point in the season.
Yes.
And I don't think it's that much of a hot take, to be honest.
No.
Well, this team's not in a playoff picture without him.
They're not even close to the playoff picture without Jacob Markstrom at this point. Like, Jacob Markstrom, you would need two hands to count the number of games that Jacob Markstrom has stolen for the Vancouver Canucks this season. I would say, without looking up every single game to this point, Markstrom has probably stolen somewhere in the range of 8 to 12 points in the standings for the Canucks on his own.
Right, and I think you see how quickly the wheels come off. It wasn't long that we were out of a playoff race like 2 weeks ago, right? Yeah. So I think Markstrom doesn't perform. We have a couple tough matchups. And it can be very easily go wrong for the Canucks.
Well, so I ask you this Markstrom, is that equivalent to the 06-07 Roberto Luongo? Who?
No, I mean, that team... That Roberto Luongo 07 team, Chris, you remember, they were pretty bad on paper.
Well, I wouldn't say pretty bad on paper.
But the Sedins were just coming into their own around that time. They were just starting to really emerge as real frontline players. And then behind them, there wasn't a whole lot else.
No, and that's why I'm sort of looking at the current Canucks, saying you've got a Pettersson, you've got a Besser, you've got a Hughes.
Luongo, if I remember, was the Vezina candidate that year as well, right?
The Vancouver Canucks, he got 47 wins that season.
And if I remember, he made 72 saves in Game 1 against Dallas that year as well.
That was
Roberto Luongo that year was probably that was his first year with the Vancouver Canucks, and that was on an insane type of play. Jacob Markstrom is getting in that stratosphere, if you will, because that was probably one of the greatest seasons by a Canucks goaltender in history. But Markstrom's sort of elevating himself into that most memorable performances in a season by one Canucks goaltender. Mm-hmm. And like you said at the top, I kind of think this is the year for Jacob Markstrom to vault himself into some sort of Vezina consideration. If you look at the stats, there's not one particular goalie that's jumping off the page as the clear-cut front-runner for the Vezina.
No, I mean, that mid-season vote, I think, who was in the conversation? Pekka Rinne, Connor Hellebuyck, I think.
Hellebuyck's performing really well for Winnipeg.
Carter Hart got a vote.
Carter Hart, Andrei Vasilevsky, but these guys in different circumstances, they're either buoyed by great teams playing in front of them, or they've just historically been very good goaltenders.
That's the thing. Canucks are at the stage right now where they're still, they're still in between, right? They have some good offense, but, it's like 1.5 lines maybe of good offense. And then the defense is kind of a mess. Still.
And none of us here are really going to say that the team in front of Jacob Markstrom is bad, but Markstrom, like we've mentioned, has just been that good for this team.
Yeah, but it hasn't been great, the team in front of him.
It hasn't been great, yeah. Let's put it this way. I think the team acknowledges that they're not playing their best hockey in front of Markstrom and that Markstrom has single-handedly stolen them some games. But, the team is definitely better than they have been in previous years, for sure.
Right, yeah. I think they're just at that stage now where they're still at that in-between time, so Markstrom's having to fill in the gaps, if you will.
Yeah, 919 save percentage, having looked it up. If we look at goaltenders who've played 25 games or more, which arguably is I think, a good figure for a starting goaltender. Right. Just doing a quick count off the top of my head here, he would be in sixth. Yeah, sixth spot for save percentage.
Yeah. We have talked about this ad nauseum throughout the season, Chris, but the outstanding Jacob Markstrom, what to do with expansion coming up kind of situation. We all know Jacob Markstrom is an impending unrestricted free agent after this season. Does it actually serve the Canucks well in the long term if they're giving Jacob Markstrom a blank check at the end of the year to get him locked down to an extension?
No.
But if you sign him to a long-term contract with a lot of dollars, doesn't that make it more or less likely that the Seattle franchise would want to pick him up?
Yeah, but then we're still stuck with that contract that we don't.
I'm not saying like we're signing Jacob Markstrom to a $10 million a year contract, but I feel a Seattle expansion franchise would be much more hesitant to take on a freshly signed, let's say, $5 by $6 million a year Jacob Markstrom.
Well, sure, but I just really hesitate to giving any goalie, never mind like he's not old, but older goalie that long.
But exploring the let's try to have our cake and eat it too situation by keeping both Markstrom and Demko. That is one slightly realistic path where the Canucks can conceivably keep both goaltenders.
Right, and I know Canucks are also kind of just banking on the fact that Seattle won't pick up one of our goalies, and we've got to protect one of them and expose one of them. So, and I think they're just kind of banking on the fact that they won't pick up. Like, Markstrom's playing really well, but is he the best goalie in the league? Not even close. Like, of a career.
So, the Canucks are going to have a decision to make as to who they would protect. And ultimately, who they protect is indicative of where they see the team, the progress of the team. The way Markstrom's playing, if the Vancouver Canucks were to sign him to he's going to be getting himself a decent contract. Right. I actually wonder how he fits in the Canucks cap picture based on what he could probably get on the market. But hypothetically, the Vancouver Canucks sign him. I'm going to think they're going to probably sign him for maybe 5 years.
Yeah.
Like, that seems to be the sweet spot. You're right, he's not a $10 million goaltender. He doesn't have a Vesna, Stanley Cup, nothing that would get that type of money. But if the Vancouver Canucks are now that perennial playoff contender, a Stanley Cup contender, and he's continuing to play out of his mind, the Vancouver Canucks protect him, and, I am sorry to say it would be, peace be with you, Demko potentially. And I'm not trying to suggest Demko's gone. It's just that's the choice they make.
So the other thing is, look around the league, and we've talked about this too. Tristan Jarry, by the way, he's performing really well. If you look at who's leading the league in goals against average right now, he is carrying the Pittsburgh Penguins in the absence of Matt Murray playing not so well. Would you rather have Matt Murray or an unproven Thatcher Demko if you're the Seattle expansion team?
Oh, Matt Murray.
Probably as well. So that is another alternative route you can take in trying to keep both Markstrom. And honestly, I don't know about how you guys feel, but I would try and do whatever it takes to keep both Markstrom and Demko without having to incentivize Seattle to not take one of them.
Well, we also have to consider there is we're talking because we see this through the lenses of a Vancouver Canucks fan. there are going to be a lot of goaltenders available.
Right.
I'm actually not so certain what we see today between a Demko and a Markstrom that the Canucks have too much to worry right now.
I think so too.
Right, yeah, and that's what I was saying, that the Canucks are kind of banking on that a little bit. But just to play devil's advocate slightly, although I'd rather keep both, obviously, if Demko goes, what we're losing is the promise of something, right?
With another promise arguably close behind, albeit, developmentally, 2 years less. The question about Markstrom coming back as a Vancouver Canuck. Do you think the Vancouver Canucks actually bring him back? Like, I'm concerned at this point that the market is going to outbid the Canucks.
I'm not worried about it. I think Markstrom's heart is in Vancouver. I think he wants to get paid. Like, this is his first real opportunity to get a big contract. I think the Canucks have invested so much time and energy into helping Markstrom get to this point that they see this as a time where they want to get a deal done. Everything we've heard up until this point is that both sides want to get a deal done. I'm not worried that a deal is going to get done. I think it will get done.
Before free agency? Or... Yep. So, like, actually...
Look, we thought the same thing about Alex Edler after going into unrestricted free agency as well, that there was the possibility Alex Edler could leave, and I think he didn't really entertain it that seriously, and I think it's the same thing with Jacob Markstrom.
Yeah, but Edler and Markstrom are in two different points in their career.
Yes.
Like, Edler wasn't going to command...
But also, at the same time, how much more is Jacob Markstrom going to get outbid by another team? How many other teams are really looking for a goalie and are willing to give Markstrom that kind of money to be their goalie?
Well, it's not so much the outbid because we really need a goaltender. It's the teams that know that they can get a goaltender for a number that's the Canucks can't afford. Mm-hmm. And Markstrom arguably is going to be a good goaltender. I mean, we don't see any reason why now. Last year he's turned a corner. Is he going to be able to maintain that? He is. He's continuing to lead. I can't suggest that I see any reason why he wouldn't. Now, the Vancouver Canucks are tight to the cap and have to consider, as we've talked about in previous episodes, when Pettersson and Hughes and, heck, Jake need to start getting paid. I don't know how much money they can tie up in the net because we've been into that rodeo before.
Totally. And I think I kind of fall down the middle here because I agree with Matt that goalies are a hard market and they don't necessarily command this great value, but at the same time, Canucks are up against it, so even a sort of mid-range value might be a tricky ask for them. Mm-hmm. I think Term will be a big player here because...
Mm-hmm. And if Markstrom wants like years, and I say years, we're talking up to the 7 number. I don't know if the Vancouver Canucks would then commit big money, but they might. I could see the Vancouver Canucks being willing to give him term.
Anything else on the Jacob Markstrom thing? Can we bring it back to the Vancouver Canucks and the streak that they're on?
Are they on a streak?
They're on a 7-game win streak, in case you forgot.
Still don't believe it.
So the Vancouver Canucks are heading out onto the road, a 5-game road trip. At some point, we know on this road trip, the Canucks have to lose a game.
Yeah, and if they make it to the weekend, they hate those weekend games. We've got a 10
Oh, the matinee doozies?
Yeah.
A rematch against who else, Anna? The Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah, so...
Are you going to sing that song?
No, I won't sing the song.
Thank God. But yeah, we've got 2 early games, back-to-back, Saturday, Sunday, and Canucks just historically do not perform well there, so if we make it past Tampa, then...
They got games against Tampa tomorrow or today for those listening to the podcast, and then they've got Florida on Thursday. At what point does the streak end? Does it end on Tuesday? And acknowledging it could be a moot point by the time most people listen, but...
Right, I mean...
Tampa Bay, by the way, they've also won 7 in a row.
Yeah, I see it's going to be either Tuesday or Saturday. Like, I see us beating Florida, but...
You don't think they could beat Buffalo again?
I just hate those morning games. I see us...
You worry too much about the morning games.
Yeah.
If I had to...
They've literally already beaten Buffalo in a matinee game this season.
Yeah, but matinee, at home.
If I had a game that they needed to lose, just lose against Tampa and start a new streak against Florida.
That's Mr. Optimist over here.
Wow.
Let's start a new 7-game streak after this. What's going on? This went from the most negative podcast to the most optimistic.
It's like we're essentially the podcast for bandwagon.
We've been drinking the clay Kool-Aid.
The clay.
The clay aid.
Oh God. By the way, what counts as a streak? 4 games? 5?
2.
No.
2 is not a streak.
Back in 2015-16
3 is not
it
a
was.
streak. Okay, no.
The definition of a streak.
Go to the Major League thing.
Comes from
Thank
one of
you,
the
I saw
greatest movies
exactly.
of all time.
Sure. How could I forget? It used to be
It's
in our
called
clip.
a winning streak.
Yeah, that's right. When you win 1 game, you win 2. But when you win 3, it's
That's
called a winning
winning
streak.
Sure.
Oh, classic. I gotta go watch that again.
In fact, I think it's in one of our jobs.
It is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that still there? Yeah.
It's around somewhere. Honestly, if I'm a betting man, I think Tampa Bay is where the streak comes to an end, if you will, just because Tampa looks every bit like the Stanley Cup contender that we've seen thus far. Now, that said, the Vancouver Canucks are still coming into this game in a playoff position, if you can believe it. And if the playoffs were to start today, where are they in the standings, in the wild card standings?
3rd in the Pacific.
3rd in the Pacific, but they've got a couple games in hand, if I'm
Right.
not mistaken, right? On both Arizona and on Vegas. Are the Vancouver Canucks, Chris, going to make the playoffs first and foremost? Let me ask you.
Yes.
Oh, he's finally bought in. Remember, he was riding the fence the last
But
time.
I am...
Don't you fence it again.
No. I'm regretting saying yes. I truly am. But at some point in time, I have to come around to this idea that this Canucks team is they're finding ways to win games they should have no business winning. Like that, the Stanley 94 Stanley Cup rematch that we had this past week. The Vancouver Canucks,
Our Lord and
really,
Savior, Tyler Meyer, scoring the game winner with 2 minutes left.
No business winning this game. I mean, all things considered, but they found a way. Markstrom made sure pucks did not go in the net, including a 2-pad stacker.
That 2-pad stacker looked amazing, though.
That
I
was
was like,
cool.
where's Kirk? Did Kirk see it?
Okay, there was a part of me that wondered, is he that good that he knows the significance of that 2-pad stack in this
Well,
game?
I think he was just doing whatever he could to make
said
that
he was
save.
just trying to find a way.
I know that's the case, but there's a part of me that wonders, is he really that good? Because that would be even more epic. But yeah, no, I
don't think anyone's that good.
I think the Vancouver Canucks are going to make the playoffs.
So-
I will agree to that.
And I'll ask the same question, but let me ask you it this way. Are the Canucks making it because they actually deserve to be in the playoffs, or are they making it because the rest of the Pacific is just that bad? Because the Pacific Division as a whole, we have to all acknowledge, has not been at its strongest.
Right. I don't know if Pacific has ever been strong. However, it's not.
Really?
It's not that.
There was
old.
a time when we
Maybe
looked
the
at those
first year?
California road trips.
Yeah.
and
Okay,
we
the
were
first
like,
year of the Pacific maybe, but it's only 5 years old or something. Not even.
Well, the new Pacific. If
Well,
you
so
will.
the Pacific used to be
It was the Northwest.
two world. Well, it was sort of the two worlds. Like there was strength in California,
Right.
right? And like essentially the strength in the West. 'Cause
Right.
You could almost say the
but
Vancouver
LA
Canucks were
haven't
there.
been good for
No, but like when the
3
wheels fell
years.
off the division, they all 4 of them came.
Well,
right off.
yeah, because Anaheim and LA both aged out, basically.
San Jose's
And San
clearly
Jose.
bottomed out to that point now too.
Calgary was once there, and then
But it's come to the point now where the only real heavyweight, if you will, of the Pacific that you can guarantee will make the playoffs seems to be Vegas.
Right.
Everyone else, it's like a free for all.
And I hate playing Vegas.
Vegas is very annoying to play against. I don't know. Am I the only one who thinks that?
like when you say annoying, is it just the style of game?
It's the
Like,
style
Yeah.
of game. It's the fan base. It's the stupid night things that they do all the time.
Yeah, even
They're
though it
quickly
completely
This has the
matches
potential
them.
to be a rivalry, I think, down the road.
Yeah.
Did you expect anything different from a team in Vegas?
I know.
No, no.
I know.
I
But
know
that
this is
doesn't
not
mean
a-
I can't be annoyed by them.
I know this is not a football podcast, but wait until Raiders Nation goes to Vegas.
Yeah. And then, like, aside from Vegas, like, Arizona is suddenly vaulting themselves into playoff contention. They've got Taylor Hall. And then, like, is anyone really counting on Calgary or Edmonton? Like, does anyone take Calgary or Edmonton seriously as real playoff threats, if you will?
I mean, I don't, especially with Edmonton. Edmonton are putting it together recently, though.
Well,
But
they're 1 and 2 in the wild card spots right now.
but ultimately, as much as I don't see the Canucks putting together like they're kind of cheating on this winning streak, right? I definitely think Edmonton don't have the longevity to last much. It may be they'll make the playoffs. but-
I go to the point where I think the Vancouver Canucks, the Oilers, the Flames, in fact, you could include the Jets and even maybe the Coyotes. We're just in this sort of mishmash of teams. There's really no team that's going fast in any one direction, streak aside. The Vancouver Canucks have a 7-game streak, and the best that's elevated them to is third in the Pacific. Take that streak away, and we're not even having this conversation. Adam is, back on the podcast and laying into the team.
Right. I mean, I don't really believe this, but we are 3 games behind Vegas, so we would be first in the Pacific if we won all of those. So
fair enough.
That's a big what if going on a 5-game road trip.
Yeah, I don't
who knows?
really
Maybe the Canucks
believe
will go into the All-Star break on a 12-game winning streak.
Fair enough. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll give out some report cards or some grades, if you will, at the mid-season point. All that coming up next on the C4 podcast, right here on CanucksHockeyBlog.com.
He liked to say the F word.
Well, then get the here then. Okay, see ya.
Is going to have the F word on it.
I wish I could give you an explanation about it. I can't.
You, out of here.
You said the F word, Dad.
You called me the F word.
Before we actually get into the F word here, I just want to give a shout out to both Nexus and Bearded Canuck in patron chat. Currently having an argument between the two.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily relate to the podcast
No,
all the time.
not at all. And then at one point here, you've got Nexus saying, "Can we stop for a minute and say how awesome the Kess and Juice podcast is?" I've yet to listen to it.
What?
I've yet to listen to it. I'm living vicariously through those of you who listen to C4, happen to hop into Gate 16, and tell me how awesome it is.
Okay, so let me preface this by saying the audio quality of that. The producer in me is shocked and abhorrent about how bad the quality is of that podcast.
Well, I mean, considering some of the episodes we've pumped out.
Oh no, but this is way worse. I think the audio quality is way worse, right?
I feel like Kessler's setup, whatever he has at home in Michigan, is terrible.
They're millionaires. You could afford some good quality microphones and a decent connection here.
What I will say is it's so entertaining, well worth listening to, but it really reminds me of the first Star Wars that was back, Force Awakens. Force Awakens, bear with me, not a good movie, but very entertaining because it brought all back nostalgia, just hit every beat.
Okay.
So, in terms of a well-produced, well-thought-out podcast, it's not that. But it has so many good stories.
Just to give you some nuggies from the podcast, in episode 5, the most recent one that was given out this Friday, as we pump out the tires of another podcast, Kessler and Bieksa talked about the Heritage Classic, which was in 2013 between the Senators and the Vancouver Canucks at BC Place. I was there actually live in my one and only year as a sports reporter. And they talked very candidly about how Roberto Luongo should have gotten the start in the Heritage Classic instead of Eddie Lack.
Which I think
everyone and their dog knew about, right? Everyone knew
Eddie
and
Lack
was surprised.
says that.
Eddie Lack says it, and Eddie Lack had to bear that burden, if you will. But it's just very interesting hearing it from their own insider perspective about how everyone in that locker room knew Luongo should have been the starter for that game, and how instead Torts and from the top to the bottom, everyone had buy-in that it should have been Lack to be the starter for that game. But there is all that kinds of behind-the-scenes information, if you will. They peel back the curtain from those ever since those two started in Vancouver, which was 2005 or so to 2015, about how all those little behind-the-scenes moments. And as a Canucks fan, I think it's particularly interesting, but probably less so if you're not a Canucks fan.
Does the Kess and Juice podcast help reinvigorate Kessler as a Canuck? Is he going to get the Bure effect here?
Yeah. So I've said this a long time now, that Kessler clearly has, quote-unquote, forgiven Vancouver. Not that he deserves forgiveness or that we should be forgiven, but Kessler clearly looks back on his time in Vancouver very fondly. It was the prime of his career. And I know Vancouver Canucks fans are rightfully salty at Ryan Kessler, but I'm hoping that he does get that Pavel Bure treatment one day.
Okay, because the Pavel Bure correlation here is that Bure was a phenomenal Vancouver Canuck, arguably either our only or potentially first superstar. And when he left on his terms. I mean, he essentially forced the Vancouver Canucks to trade him, sat out until Brian Burke came in, got the job done. What we since learned is the Vancouver Canucks were taking the screws to Pavel as well. We learned that well after the fact, so that kind of softened things. And then now Bure, he's back in the team's good graces. Fans, adore him. And I kind of wonder if Brian Kessler got at that point. The other thing I wanted to call out about patron chat to Bearded Canuck, telling us that we shouldn't promote other podcasts, which is interesting because in Discord, for those who weren't there, his name is Shameless Bearded Canuck. Why? Because he promotes another podcast all the time.
Anyway.
But the gracious Discord overlord that I am allows for it to occur. Anyhow,
look,
report cards.
It is the first podcast of 2020. Let's start off with on a good note, and let's stay on the rails, so to speak. So this is not going to be your traditional A, B, and C letter grades for every single player. And instead, what we're going to do, just to abbreviate this a little bit, is to give 3 players that are exceeding expectations, meeting expectations, and performing below expectations. And we'll go around the room, starting with exceeding expectations, and we'll go ladies first, Anna. Name one player that is exceeding expectations for you this season.
Easy answer, but JT Miller.
Yep.
I think we all thought he was a good player before he came. Not many people liked the price that we were paying for him. We still maintain that's a separate issue from his performance. But I think he's better than we all thought he was going to be. He's gelled with PD and Brock so well. And yeah, been super consistent.
And I think on pace to obliterate his career high for points, which is in the 60s, if I'm not mistaken. So already at, 42 points at the halfway mark, producing just below a point per game. And I think there's no doubt that... And can we also talk about not just the points that JT Miller... I think JT Miller has clearly emerged as kind of almost the heartbeat of the team, or is that too much of an exaggeration? It seems like the Canucks follow his lead a little bit too sometimes.
Well, in the early part of the season, it was Miller's offensive production that was, almost invigorating the rest of the team. Once that slowed, we started to see the Vancouver Canucks maybe take the foot off the gas a little bit. So your point, you might be right. It's also 40 points. Americans. I'm curious, though, if we're going to pick a player as exceeding expectations, could it be fair to say with Miller that, yes, he might be exceeding our expectations, but not the expectations that we were told to have about him?
Sure.
The player, though, that in my mind should be top of any exceeds expectations table is Jake Virtanen.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking about this today, and I can't think of any other player on the Canucks roster to date that, would beat him. Markstrom, we thought he might. We weren't sure. I think he's part of the conversation. But arguably, Jake Virtanen went from Jag to, heck, just a few episodes you and I are talking holy smokes, this is now a real deal here.
Well, I think you probably could have been talked into at the beginning of the season at Jake for a second round pick. Would you have done it at the beginning of the year?
Yeah. And I mean, not because I don't like Jay. It's just we can get something.
We just thought that he was at that point replaceable.
Yeah. In fact, I mean, we could even sort of rewind, back to when Pittsburgh was in town. People are like, oh, so the Vancouver Canucks traded McCann away? But now, I mean, you sort of take this step back and you look at Jake and his performance and the way he's playing. Even against the Rangers, Jake just decided, he's like, okay, I'm going to go and be a power forward now. And he's doing that more and more game in and game out. Whereas the problem we saw with him earlier is oh yeah, I'm a power forward for 5 minutes tonight. And then we'd see him maybe in a month again.
Right, and I guess we only have to look back to training camp and Jake's poor showing there to...
And so from an expectation perspective, what did we think about Jake at the start of the season? We didn't have any.
Yeah, and I think that reinforced a lot of things that we thought about him.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean there are no off ice issues at all, but I'm sure that his better discipline off the ice has really helped him on.
Yep. So I'm obviously last for who exceeded expectations, and I will sort of bring it around the circle by acknowledging again that there are a few players that you could say exceeded expectations. Jacob Markstrom has certainly exceeded expectations. Quinn Hughes has probably exceeded some people's expectations as well with his great start to the year. Josh Levo has gotten some consideration. Adam Gaudette has been in the category for exceeding expectations, but I'm going to go to Tanner Pearson. There's a guy who, at the halfway mark of the year, is probably... Are you shocked? Are you surprised?
Chris's eyebrows.
I don't think it's that surprising. Like, if you go back the last, 20 games or so, isn't Tanner Pearson the team's leading scorer for the last 20 games?
Well, I would have to go and look at the numbers for that. I struggle to wonder... Like, of all the names, like Tanner Pearson...
I don't think it's that crazy. I think in terms of who has exceeded their most expectations, I think it's Tanner Pearson.
I mean, are you on setting the same bar that Vancouver Canucks setting in Discord right now by saying like Louis Eriksson? Because Louis Eriksson's exceeded expectations.
Sure, but I don't think a lot of us expected Tanner Pearson to consistently perform at second line production, which is what he has. He's on pace for about 60 points this year, Chris.
I think he has exceeded expectations. I don't know if he'd be top 3 on my list, but
I could.
I also think Louis, just because he's scored a couple goals and played all right against New York. That
sure. I mean, we could be facetious and say Louis Eriksson has exceeded
how long
expectations.
is this exceed expectations list? Like, if it's as long as we need it to be, then you know what? Sure, let's put Tanner Pearson on it. But
okay, who's your number 3?
Who's my number 3? Mm-hmm. So I have Josh Levo. Was number. I have Josh Levo number 2.
Josh Levo is up there for me. I just think, obviously, it's a shame that he's having such a lengthy injury because I can't imagine he'll continue at the same pace when he comes back.
What did you expect out of Tanner Pearson this year?
Well, so I actually expected more of what we saw at the end of last season. He had chemistry with Bo.
Yeah.
That's sort of what I.
So do you think he's picked up
in.
where he's left off from where that was?
Yeah, it's the serviceable. I'll use the Sutter minute type. If he can give you second or third line minutes and production.
But he's giving you clear second line production right now.
Sure, but the expectation I had is to sort of be in that game. I'm not going to take away from the fact that
No, I know, and I'm not sort of trying to discredit your thing either. But we also thought Sven Baertschi was going to be back at this spot at some point this year too. And Tanner Pearson has made it very easy for Travis Green not to have him in this lineup.
Sure. Number 3 was Alex Edler.
We've always known, though, Alex Edler is like the safe and solid type of player, though.
No, yeah, but I'd suggest he's exceeding. Look at the Vancouver Canucks when he's out of the lineup. That team falls apart.
Oh, I know, but that was the case before this year, too, though.
Sure, but
much different.
We had moved on from the Alex, Edler error. Like, this was him getting onto his retirement
I would put Edler in the meet
and
expectations category for me.
Okay.
Because I think the reason that we were willing to move on is just we didn't want to be locked down to a big contract with him.
Yep.
So the fact
we saw him as replaceable.
We did, but we also both said that we wanted him back as well, though.
No, I mean, but I'll use Tanner Pearson. I mean, Tanner Pearson, we would have wanted him back, but if he had not made it back to this team and was traded away, we would have like. I'm not saying Alex Edler is up there, but I feel that he is exceeding expectations that I would have set. I didn't expect anything more out of him than to provide a veteran presence and serviceable second pairing minutes.
You wanna take the lead here on first player that meets your expectations this year?
Bo Horvat.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too. I'll think of someone else.
Sorry. I just think obviously there's extra pressure. He's actually spoken recently on that, like extra pressure as captain.
To your point, I would say that he also at some point, maybe in December, until the start of December, was underperforming and has since elevated his play a little bit. Not just because he's putting up some points now, but
right. But he's had the toughest matchups on the entire team. He's had all the extra pressure of captain, and the fact that he hasn't bowed under that shows just exactly why he was the right guy to be put in that role. Just on and off the ice, he's just strong.
Mm-hmm. Christoph?
Well, the only player that I could actually say sort of hits that meets expectations would be Bo Horvat.
Yep.
But as I'm sitting here, pondering my thoughts, I'm actually going to put PD into meets expectations.
Yep,
though
I think that's fair.
I think there are some who would say, well, no, he is not. But I think he overproduced last year to some respect.
Yep.
And now he's sort of found his groove. So I might put PD there as well.
I would also say, in some ways, you could talk me into the notion that PD's actually performing above expectations.
Yeah?
I think there was some maybe small certain percentage of audience that would say that Pettersson could have faced the sophomore slump a little harder. He's the guy on the Vancouver Canucks now with the Sedins gone, and therefore faces much more tougher opposition. But despite that, has consistently produced at both 5-on-5 and on the power play. He's at a point per game, so he's still on pace for 80 points, which would be far superior to the numbers that he put up in his rookie year and on a similar point per game pace.
Yeah.
I would say he's meeting expectations, though. You got me there.
Well, no, but I think there are also some that could say he's not. Like, we had such great expectations.
But what were they expecting then?
Well, no, that's the thing.
Yeah, I think it's unrealistic.
Were they expecting 100 points out of Pettersson by this point?
Oh, well, he could do this in his first, and it's the unrealistic. So to some, I think they could see him as not meeting. Because his line mate, Brock Besser, I would suggest is trending on the not meeting expectation.
We'll get to him, of course. I think one of us has it in us to say Brock Besser is underperforming. Yeah. My
Anyone
meeting
else?
Expectations is Tyler Myers. I don't think a lot of us loved the term and the money that Tyler Myers was signing for.
He's doing what
but he is doing exactly what we thought he was going to do. He's not putting up, he's not going to score 20 goals a season, right? But I think for the most part, he's been somewhat reliable. Well, he's been consistently reliable in his own zone. He doesn't get into trouble too often from the back end. He's added a bit of a stabilizing presence on the back end, especially in games where either Alex Edler or Chris Tanev couldn't suit up. Tyler Myers is certainly not going to be a top pairing defenseman, but he's a solid top 4 defenseman. Getting paid, the $6 million that he's getting a year, it's not great, but it's like, it is what it is with Tyler Myers, so I would say he's at least meeting expectations. He's doing enough not to be below expectations.
Agreed.
A solid power play 2 guy. He almost had a hat trick against Calgary. Are we going to talk about that?
Well, then he would be.
I mean, the squeaker he put past David Rittich to get that second goal was ugly. But
ugly goals are important, and that's what keeps a winning streak alive.
As it's always said, they don't measure the quality on the score sheet.
They don't draw pictures on the score sheet. Dan Ham, you said that, and I live my life by that. Teaching.
Anna, you're going to round out the underperforming players, and you'll start.
See, I think there's 2 off the top of my head.
I'm trying to think of someone that's not Brock.
Well, no, and actually, this is not Brock. I have 2 players.
Okay, so Anna, you can lead with Brock.
Okay, sure, Brock. I feel a bit bad about saying that because I don't think it's doom and gloom with him by any means.
But he is on a pace below 30 goals, which I think everyone thought was at least the bar.
Yeah, and you do think that, as long as you keep him and PD together, they really should be producing better than that. And there's some bad puck luck in there, sure. There's some bad bounces, but as you saw with Bo Horvat and his lack of scoring at home, sometimes you just gotta get some more ugly ones in there, and there are just some questionable shooting, either decisions or just some questionable shooting in there.
It's the decision making. I think he could easily turn it around if he started, 1, being a little bit smarter, but 2, just being a little more selfish.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I said that during the game 1 of this winning streak there, just shoot the puck.
Has a quick question for the room, and we'll keep it super quick, but has Brock Besser's potential production been mitigated by the fact that JT Miller has been playing that much better?
Oh gosh, yeah. And that's where, when we look at sort of what Miller is doing, and that's why I sort of said
it's definitely come at the expense of Besser. There's just that one extra option for Pettersson to have that was not there for Besser.
Sure, but I don't necessarily know it's been at the expense of Besser. I actually think, Besser is, to use the cliche term, squeezing his stick just a little too hard. He's trying to be too much of a player when really, arguably, with the Miller acquisition,
he doesn't need to be.
He doesn't need to be. He doesn't need to be sort of that player he had to have been previously. And that when that transition takes place, now you have a wicked first line.
You go.
So Michael Furland.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think it's hard. It's hard to say that, but because of the fact he's missed so many games.
And the other one was Brandon Sutter. To me, those 2 players, and this is an injury-related below expectations, but Michael Furland was brought in for a reason, and unfortunately, what is it? The most recent one is still concussion-related, I believe.
Yeah.
Or I hate for a player to suffer as much as he has, but the expectation that we had for Michael Furland is he was going to be coming in and providing that.
Well, we thought he was going to be in the
sandpaper.
top 6 instead of Tanner Pearson for some stretches too.
And then Brandon Sutter, who is cursed, right? He can't seem to find a way to stay healthy. But we have seen at least that when he is able to, he starts to provide that serviceable time. He's strong in the circle. Just somehow he needs to figure out how to keep himself on the bench and not in the IR or the ER. Sorry.
So the last one I have here is maybe a bit of a hot take, but I'm going to say Jay Beagle. We've seen in some doses throughout even the 7-game win streak, that fourth line of Beagle, Mott, and Schaller has been very poopy. And
that's a nice way to put it.
For Jay Beagle to be like one of the quote-unquote prized free agent signings, making $2.5 million a year, I expect a little bit more in terms of stabilized play on that fourth line, and Jay Beagle has kind of under-delivered so far on that promise. I'm hopeful that maybe some of it is him coming back from injury and sort of getting back up to speed, but if this 7-game win streak and you're still seeing some kind of shaky play on the how many times have we seen the fourth line is sort of chasing the puck in their own zone?
The fourth line goes out there and you're like, okay, please have a safe 30 seconds.
Like you expect your fourth line to get out there and their goal should just not to get scored on, right?
Yeah,
they're simply there to eat minutes that the first, second, and third lines cannot eat.
Yes.
And I just find that they're chasing a lot in their own zone a little bit too much more than they should be.
If this was a Tortorella coach team, that line never sees the ice.
Yeah, I think there's been some pretty bad pinches in there and then losing the puck and they just end up chasing the game.
And for a while, that fourth line looked great to start the season, but it has significantly cooled off in the last 10, 15 games of the year. And it's kind of a disturbing trend when the Canucks need to be rolling four lines a lot more consistently, especially in the dog days of the season, if you will. So if the Canucks have any playoff aspirations, they're going to need a little bit more from their fourth line, and especially from Jay Beagle, to step up and eat those 10 to 11 minutes a night that they should be getting.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to get to a World Juniors recap as we continue things here on the C4 podcast on CanucksHockeyBlog.com.
Take hitting out of the game. You can't hit anymore, so don't do it.
The unsportsmanlike conduct, I want to get an explanation on it.
No kidding.
Because how do you get suspended for unsportsmanlike conduct?
Plus interference. There's no interference there. He had the puck.
Now, Madison never ever did that before. Now, why did he do it? And that because he was mad.
Well, your early favorite for the Calder Trophy, that's for sure. Elias Pettersson, you might even say your early favorite for the Hart Trophy.
Just to get back to your question, Elias is going to play plenty. He's going to get a lot of power play time, and yeah, I'm concerned about our offense. We lost 200-point players, and we've got to find a way to score.
So how much are you guys... Oh, first of all, let's start with who watched the Canada versus Russia gold medal game.
Yeah, I watched it in a white spot. Very Canadian.
Very classy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's funny. That's where I watched it, too.
Oh.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Different white spots.
Different white spots. I went out for breakfast with the wife and baby Force, and we were in a white spot.
Yeah.
I had it on before we'd sort of gone out. But if you happen to be in Russia, you may have watched the game, or you may have watched.
I saw Russia win.
Did you guys see that story?
Yeah, yes. I saw it this morning. That's crazy.
It's crazy that the whole background was that the state-owned sports channel had the rights, and then at the highest levels, they decided to pivot it over to the more popular, sort of state-owned news channel,
BBC One.
And left the sports station with this giant hole that they needed to go and fill with content. So what did they do? They just went and played an old footage, right? But no one noticed it. There was a story, I think, about Victor Tarasenko was watching the game.
Vladimir Tarasenko.
Vladimir Tarasenko was watching the game.
This is why Dak doesn't like us.
I know. And it wasn't until he saw himself on the ice that he realized he was watching the wrong game.
How do you not realize that, by the by?
Well, you got to consider, when I'm watching, I watch World Junior Tournament, I don't necessarily know all the players that
Fair enough.
I don't follow.
But if you're Vladimir Tarasenko and you were on that team, how do you not see them calling out teammates that you obviously played in that tournament with and realize like, oh, that's my tournament.
Well, no, but like, I mean, common names, whatever, I don't know. But like, once he saw himself, he's like, oh, wrong game, and then went and flipped it over to the correct one, right?
So let's go from a Canucks perspective first. I think a lot of us thought coming into this tournament that this was going to be Vasily Podkolzin's tournament to shine in, and it turned out to actually be a different Canucks prospect that shined. Nils Hoglander. Nils Hoglander finishing with 11 points in the tournament. He dazzled on some nights. We saw the lacrosse-like goal. We also saw the not-so-good part of Hoglander's game, which was the elbow that he got ejected for. Mm-hmm. I'll let you go first, big guy, and you can talk to me about like what your expectations were. What are the takeaways, if you will, from that tournament, watching it from a Canucks lens?
So, well, I mean, you've sort of brought this up in Discord before. You look at Podkolzin, he is not getting the opportunity to develop right now. He's getting very little ice time. So it's difficult to go and then say, okay, suddenly you've got the lens on you at the World Juniors and you're going to
rip it up.
Yeah, exactly. I think he was an adequate player, but he didn't show us anything more that we didn't already know. Whereas Hoglander, who's the opposite, he is getting an opportunity to dazzle. He goes to the World Juniors and does. And on the note of the hit, and this conversation happened in Discord, from a perspective of the hit, I don't like it. It was high, hit on the head. But the point was raised. In the NHL, does that even get more than a 2-minute penalty?
I was going to say that too.
And that was definitely a penalty in the IIHF. Like that. That's not something
they call a lot of weird things in the IIHF.
Well, I actually feel the IIHF goes further to protect the players.
Yeah.
Which isn't that what you want?
Yeah,
from
like
a young players tournament.
But even then, I would actually have no problem if we saw that level of protection come, to the NHL. I know it would be a hard pill to swallow, but if it was consistent to that effect, I think we would see a far better game. It would be tough for us to accept that we're not getting these, massive hits as the players sort of find that happy ground. But you can still see in international play, there's some really big hockey hits. It's just they're done right.
Yeah. That's kind of a hot take, but I like it. I know the proper hockey men may not. They, who want the game played like it was back in the day. But I don't think it can be said that the NHL does enough to protect its players, star or otherwise. So, and I think players would eventually adapt. So I do think I don't think it's a bad thing at all if they kind of move towards a less heavy hitting game.
Yeah. But back to the comparison of Podkolzin and Hoglander.
That's what we're talking about.
I find it interesting. Was it like Hoglander is being compared to like an Alex Burrows?
Yeah, it's a bit of a stretch.
I
don't see that.
No, I'm not a hockey person, obviously, but
the comparison that Hoglander keeps getting is Victor Arvidsson in Nashville, and it's kind of like a toolsy second line winger type of player.
Yeah, but to me, I think when someone goes and says Burrows, they're seeing Burrows based on
the nasty streak.
No, the position that he played on the team, not the player that was on the ice. Like that. That's not a good comparison. That would be no different than saying he's a Kessler.
Yeah,
right. They're not
apples
at all
and
the
oranges.
Same. Exactly.
On the Podkolzin thing, I actually discovered today, by the way, that he can actually return to next year's World Junior Championship, and that will be his third tournament, if you will, and that's very rare for a lot of prospects. But since he's still in the KHL next year, I assume he gets released to play on that team next season. Maybe that's the tournament where Podkolzin's tournament breakout really happens, but I think everyone's going to look at the production that he put up or lack thereof this year and say that it was a disappointing performance, but he looked like he was involved in every single play. He looked dangerous on every shift that he was out there, and he was playing that two-way game at the same time, which is difficult to do on a Team Russia. So it's hard for me to get bogged down by the lack of numbers from Podkolzin, but there were definitely some times out there where he looked very dominant, and I hope that it will do so in the third tournament for him.
Right. It wasn't like that eye-grabbing tournament that we wanted him to have, maybe, but yeah, it wasn't completely disappointing either.
I know friend of the show Cam Robinson had picked Podkolzin as his MVP going into the tournament, so I think from that scope, sure, it's a little disappointing, but eligible to return next year, maybe that'll be the time that he'll really shine. On Hoglander, though, did the Canucks get a steal in the second round? Because it certainly seems to look like that now.
Right, and I think that was pretty much called at the time as that he was a very good value pick.
But it certainly affirms a little bit about that second round pick.
Does, and he has had some highlight reel moments, that's for sure, and that's kind of what you want from a player, that they don't feel that pressure on the world stage, and they like have that ability to sort of seize the day and perform. So I'm excited about him for sure.
Canucks don't really have that type of player. I mean, you think about, like, Petey's a good player.
Yep.
We had these expectations that Petey would be a good player. This is a kid who's exceeding expectations, but also plays with this, I'm this awesome. Like, he has that sort of chip on the shoulder, comes in.
Swagger.
It's the swagger. Like, the Vancouver Canucks have sort of missed the swagger. We thought Jared McCann had swagger.
Yeah.
This is a young kid.
That was faux swagger, though.
Exactly. I think Hoglander has that sort of real swagger to him. Like, what kid goes as far as doing a lacrosse school on the world stage
at full speed?
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like, I if that doesn't happen, if he does that and it fails,
I couldn't even do that walking, let alone at full speed.
Yeah, I've often said, this sounds OTL, but it's not, that Pedersen reminds me of watching Thierry Henry play football, in that, like, he just looks like he'll do something exciting. And Thierry Henry always used to say, like, I'm not trying to be cheeky, I'm just trying to, like,
be creative.
And sometimes the game calls for me to be a bit cheeky, but that's just, like, me responding to the game. So I think Hoglander is that player. I don't think he's, like...
He didn't even
can
score
back it up,
on this play, but you remember the clip of him behind the net again, and he tried to flip the puck over the net to get it up to a teammate. Like, who thinks of stuff like that?
Yeah, it's just that creativity, which is exciting more than anything.
So Hoglander next year, I mean, no one here is going to try to prognosticate what the future holds for Niels Hoglander, but does anyone here think, having watched the World Juniors, is there any chance that Hoglander challenges for a roster spot or to play in games next year in the NHL?
I don't think he challenges for a roster spot. Playing games, maybe, but not even then. I think
hard not to get excited though about
it.
Just patience is a virtue.
I think if you're trying to look ahead though into next year, is the possibility that you see a Tyler Madden with Niels Hoglander kind of combo going into Utica though. I think that's a possibility at this point. Yeah. And they're going to get Jet Wu in that lineup next year at that point, too.
Woo!
Utica looks pretty dangerous for the next few years. Yeah. Some odds and ends before we wrap things up here in the C4 podcast. Any
Gold
thoughts
medal
on...
to the TSN camera?
In camera we trust?
Okay, so what's your take on that?
It should have been a penalty.
Yeah, it should have been a penalty.
Like, absolutely. I think even Ferraro himself was shocked it was not.
Like, I know
the camera was so clearly, like, outside of play.
Yeah.
And you see the puck come hurling at the camera on the replay. Yeah, it's like, how is this not a penalty?
Literally, they wouldn't be allowed to put it, like, anywhere that was in any way, like, on, like, classes, like, in the rink, right? Yeah. Like, it would have to be outplay, so it definitely should have.
Yeah, a buddy of mine was like, watch for TSN service to go down for weeks because Russian hackers
are Kremlin.
Gonna go after for revenge. But like, no, that should have been a penalty. Like, I know the double IHF has, again, sort of some interesting takes on things, but this is beyond them. Like, part of me
really wanted that game to get to overtime just to see the theatrics of it.
But I if it gets to overtime, I don't know if Canada pulls it out.
Yeah.
Honestly, I didn't care, though, at that point. I wanted to see a good game, and it was a very good game to that point, and so I wanted, selfishly, just to get a little bit more.
Okay, so I'll take that.
You're the fire wagon hockey guy. You love that stuff.
I know I do, but I wanted Canada to win at that point.
Right, and I'm the person that isn't super invested in whether Canada wins or not, but I definitely didn't think they were going to as I watched the first bit of that game, so I thought it was a hard-fought win on Team Canada's perspective, so...
Hey, real quick, what did everyone think of Barrett Hayton's performance in that gold medal game? Was it as great as TSN really pumped it out to be, or is this just a storyline that just got the World Juniors push?
Good Canadian kid
playing through an injury.
Yeah, like to me, there's always that storyline in any successful Canadian team. It's doing what you do for the maple leaf on your sweater, right? And that's... I'm not trying to take away from his performance, but it's
I mean, and it's
normal.
In a tournament, you kind of want to have storylines, right?
Yeah.
And he kind of went from villain to hero. So
it just felt a little bit like TSN was just really pushing that narrative, though.
Well, no, but they need that.
That's kind of their job.
I know that that's what they need, but in terms of actual hockey lore, I just don't feel that it's as quote unquote legendary as they made it out to be.
Well, no, but they're telling a story in the moment. Whether it becomes legendary over time, we'll learn in 5 and 10 years.
Like Alex Lafreniere, undrafted player right now, and had one of the best tournaments for Team Canada, and he almost had his ACL blown out in the preliminary round.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't seem like his story was being pumped up as much as Barrett Hayton. Like, after TSN pumping that out, it's like, we're only going to remember this for Barrett Hayton soldiering through that in the gold medal game?
And I will say, I do agree with you in that the narratives that kind of...
like, Jordan Eberle is a hero because of how he did in the World Juniors back in the day, too.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of narratives that kind of champion fighting through pain and that kind of macho nonsense. So, like, from that perspective, yeah. Please don't make that sound again.
Yeah, that was really weird.
Well, I didn't want to do the ooh,
but you did twice.
No, I did the ooh, not the ooh.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Macho.
Does it by the way, the Barrett Hayton thing doesn't make me any less happy, it doesn't make me any less envious, for lack of a better word, that we have Quinn Hughes over Barrett Hayton. Like, if you could pick between the two, would you still rather have Quinn Hughes? And it's not even close, right?
Yeah,
it's not even close.
But that's because I also know what Quinn Hughes does in NHL for the Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah.
I mean, Barrett Hayton was a reach at the time, and he still is now, despite winning the gold medal with Canada, in my mind. Last more bits and bobs before we wrap things up here on the C4 podcast. What did you think of 90s night on Saturday?
What, the
ceremony, the players, all that stuff, the notable omission of player who was not there?
Okay, well, that notable omission has been played off as not in the country, which is interesting that he's not in the country.
So tinfoil hat, because I know you love to wear it.
Well, no,
do you buy it?
Okay, so him not being in the country, I sort of see what's going on is Trevor Linden is not prioritizing the Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah, right? And why would you?
No, and I'm not suggesting he has to, but he's going to be there for like Legends Week and the Sedins, and why? It's because that's who he's prioritizing. It's not the team. It has absolutely nothing to do with the organization or the crest on the jersey. It's to do with the players that he respects.
And I think it could be very different.
I also think it's a shame. Because, like, it was so clear, like, this whole 50th season has been planned out so well in advance that you can't think 90s night without thinking Trevor Linden.
No, not at all. Like, they came up in After Hours when they were talking to
I have to watch
McLean
that, by the way.
And Trevor Linden and Kirk McLean. Like, and especially the 94 series.
Mm.
I mean, you guys are 100% right, but the Canucks can't have their cake and eat it too. The way they dealt with Trevor Linden.
I get where Linden's coming from, but unfortunately, as a fan, the 90s night, specifically a 94 team, it is not the theme. The theme is not the same without Trevor there.
Yeah,
it would be no different than if we looked at the 80s and Stan Smeel wasn't available.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Like
it's
every
true, but
every
Sam
decade
Smeel
is bookmarked by a player, right?
Kirk McLean is employed by the team. Like
but like the 2000s night, if the West Coast Express doesn't show up,
right?
That to me does a disservice to the
I expect all three of those guys there.
But like that's the thing. Imagine if it was like Bertuzzi and Morrison.
Whew.
But no Naslund.
Yeah, that's weird.
Right, like that to me is where Trevor doesn't come to this.
Yeah.
That's problematic. But again, it's nothing against Trevor. Unfortunately, it's just the reality situation.
Do you believe though that there is a little bit of saltiness on Trevor's part? And rightfully so, as we mentioned.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I don't think he's going out of his way to take the screws to anything. It's just a matter of I got other business to tend to.
Priorities,
100%.
You got yours, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
When is Sedin jersey retirement night, by the way? Retirement week, if you will.
Yeah, it's the week of February 10th, I believe.
Yeah, it's around my birthday.
Is that...
Hint, hint, nudge, nudge.
Yeah, because I'm going to the game on the 10th, which I believe is like Swedish...
Hint, hint, nudge, nudge.
...night or something.
Hint, hint, nudge, nudge.
Is it a Larshiders night?
It's a Larshiders night, so you can...
Go and sing that Buffalo song.
Oh, yeah. Only dumb podcasters sing that.
Whoa.
Is this nostalgia on my part back to the 90s night? I would have preferred to have seen them wear the away whites.
You can't wear away whites at home.
No, I know. There's a lot of rules.
But they did
with
wear
jerseys.
the away whites at home in the 90s.
Yeah, like that.
That is the true home jersey.
That's
If you're
true.
being very factual.
No, and like with that series, all of the.
Well, you think
some of
Game
the
6
pictures-
at Pacific Coliseum against the Rangers, 94.
So those whites.
That was the jersey they were wearing. The
Yeah.
blood-stained white jersey.
Yep.
Do you think they should have warmed up in that then? Because obviously they can't.
I don't
wear
think it would kill them to play a game with those white jerseys.
But they can't.
They can't. Like warm. You know what?
run out
Oh, right,
jerseys.
right,
Yeah,
right.
warm up. If they, because they can't, I think warm up would have been
Fair
good.
enough.
Yeah. Okay.
Because
sure.
and we've seen like they've worn different jerseys for warm up than.
Yeah,
when we
because
had
those 70s ones look sick
Oh,
in warm up. That was just so
we
cool.
saw that in the Buffalo game, didn't we?
I think that was 80s, wasn't it?
Whatever it was.
It was the 80s game. They were
Yeah,
all
the 70s one,
Livy
but the
and-
cool ones.
Anyway. Chris, as we wrap things up in the C4 podcast, why don't you tell people where they can find us?
Well, I think the best place to go is c4podcast.com. It'll redirect you to all of our podcast episodes at CanucksHockeyBlog.com. You might be also listening to us on Overtime Media, and that's phenomenal as well. But to get involved in the conversation, you need to come to Discord. Gate 16 is where it's at. To join Discord, just go to bit.ly/C4Discord, all caps. That's bit.ly/C4Discord, and that is all caps. Join the conversation, take part. If you happen to support us on Patreon, patreon.com/C4podcast, you actually get access to the inner sanctum, including the ability to listen to most of our episodes live. So again, that's a value added if you are able to help us out. Now, as far as finding us on social, it's twitter.com/the C4podcast and facebook.com/C4podcast and all the other.
What else? Other social?
I'm sure it's set up
outlets?
things over the years. I mean, we've been running for so long.
Do we have a Tinder profile?
We do not have a Tinder profile. We are not on TikTok.
Oh, yeah. That's what the kids are doing these days.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, but I kid you not, I've probably set us up in things that I've
Do we have a
forgotten
MySpace?
about. No, we shouldn't we?
Damn.
MySpace.com/C4podcast. Yeah. What final words of wisdom do you have over there, Matthew?
5-game road trip. If they can get at least 2 wins, I think they are still very well positioned for the playoffs. But if they win only 1 of the 5, I'm kind of
You're going full Adam
scary.
again?
No, I'm not full Adam, but it's like they would be doing themselves a disservice to only win 1 of the 5. Let's put it that way.
Anna.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was looking back at the rundown, and we don't actually mention Markstrom by name once. We refer to a Canucks MVP, which is probably him, but we spent like 10 to 15 minutes on him.
I know.
So that's just the power of Jacob Markstrom.
We didn't get to a lot of topics today, actually. It was the first episode of 2020, but we were also going to take a look at the trade deadline, which is not so far away and stuff like that. So
future fodder.
Fuel for
But
fodder
I'm just
for
saying
the
that's
next
how
few weeks.
powerful Jacob Markstrom is. He just takes over.
Oh, I did have a hypothetical question. You have the ability to get into a time machine, Chris, and stop the Luongo for Markstrom deal in 2013. Would you do it?
Okay, based on what I know today, no, but I would have never... I didn't want Luongo to go back then.
See, exactly.
Right? Like, if you were to go and...
So
and
if you're
ask me that
you're in the DeLorean, though, and you can...
I'd probably go back and stop that trade. Even
really?
knowing what I know today, I'd probably go back and stop that trade because I feel that Luongo would have allowed the Canucks to be a different team during sort of the deadline. That's not a knock against Miller, who ultimately was his replacement, but the Vancouver Canucks were not the same team once
yeah, fair enough.
Luongo was gone. And I know in Discord the conversation came up, like, oh, Luongo wanted out. I actually think Luongo had come to the realization that he was in Vancouver for the long haul. His contract wasn't going to allow for him to get out. And you almost saw that in his personality. The moment he came to that realization, he became sort of this better player. Like, he wasn't maybe stressing out too much about it. He was having fun up until, as we learned on the podcast from Bieksa, that the coaches made this bad decision across the board. Anyhow, it is what it is.
I thought you would appreciate a good Back to the Future reference while I was in there. 88 miles per hour.
Yeah, fire up the flux capacitor.
All right.
The one thing I just want to mention, being that this is my opportunity for final words of wisdom, I think in 2020 we need to have more guests involved.
I would agree with that.
So who needs to be our guest coordinator to make this happen? People can join us in the hot box.
Yeah, just dress appropriately.
Yes, like no clothes.
So let's put it out there. Number one, that we gotta have obviously it's going to be me trying to coordinate as many guests. But if you also think that you would be a good guest in the C4 podcast, why don't you reach out to us?
Wow, that'd be easy.
We know that there's some podcasters or fellow podcasters that listen to us. And if you're wanting to be on the C4 podcast and you're in town, give us a shout.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to drop us an email at c4@canuckshockeyblog.com, or, again, any one of us on Twitter is easily accessible. You can DM the C4 podcast on Twitter. Myself or Anna will respond. Probably Anna, not so much me.
Yeah, and if it's sassy, it's me.
Oh, it's definitely you and it's sassy, but... yeah, no, I think we need to get more people, more voices, more variety.
Since we're down a host.
Yeah, I mean, let's find who wants to be the next Adam.
Oh yeah, that's big.
That's a low bar.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, was it In Excess that did like the talent show to find a replacement, or was I don't
know.
And then Queen obviously did find a replacement.
Yeah, from a talent show, but I don't think that was directly related.
No, I know, but I'm just saying we need to find a replacement to Adam. It's hard to replace talent like that. So, it is the start of 2020. It's our first episode in the bag. We started off with a review. Hopefully, we improved upon 2019, and if not, we aim to get better as the year goes on. But on behalf of the Missing in Action, Adam Owenell Carter at AdamFOC, Matt Lee at MattLee_61, Anna Forsyth at A4Say03, and myself, Chris Golden at Light4, signing off with the magical 2 words of, we're out.